Our next speaker is an assistant professor of sales at Purdue University, where she specializes in both sales and marketing and studies the intersection of technology and professional sales. Prior to entering academia, Dr. Jen Riley was an award-winning entrepreneur and corporate marketing consultant. She is passionate about entrepreneurship education and loves finding innovative ways to engage students and help them discover their passions and talents. Please welcome to the stage Dr. Jen Riley.
Hello, everyone. I am so happy to be here. Great session right before this. Good reminders for us to help our students. And it is a perfect segue into the presentation that I am going to share with you all today, talking about soft skills and how we bridge that gap to help students understand those soft skills, but also connect those hard things that we're teaching them for them to go out into the world with the soft skills that help them excel in their positions after they get hired. So, competition is everywhere. It has increased so much. 97% of employers are saying that soft skills are as important, if not more important, than hard skills. A lot of situations, I would tell students, especially when I was in undergrad and on to today, companies will teach you how they want you to do it. College is for you to really learn how to learn. You are understanding, you're broadening your scope of experiences, you're meeting new people, you are expanding your worldview, and you're learning some of those hard skills, some of that information, some of those fundamentals, but you're also learning those interpersonal skills. That's why over 50% of employees fail within 18 months due to their lack of soft skills. They might have known the information, but they don't necessarily know how to excel, how to apply it, how to have those interactions with their peers. And that unfortunately ends up meaning that they fail in their roles. But we want to go against that. We don't want that to happen to our students. So let's talk about those soft skills and how we can combat this so that our students are not part of this percentage. Now, this is fundamentals, right? Going to the basics, the hard skills versus the soft skills. Those hard skills are more tangible, those things that you can quantify, that you can evaluate and assess. Do you know this software package or do you not? Can you run this analysis or can you not? Do you know pivot tables? Those things that you can really assess. Do you know the language C++? Are you fluent in Spanish, etc.? That's what employers are looking for those hard skills. That's what we concentrate so much in all of our courseware in the Student platform and the textbooks that we adopt. That's what we're trying to get across to students. The soft skills, however, are more of those not quantifiable attributes that are more so observed in action, and they vary based on the person or the situation. You can have a very strong soft skills in a certain situation, and then in another where you're a little bit more uncomfortable, they don't shine as much. They're often subjective. How did you handle this conflict? Did you handle it properly? Right? There is no right way to do things for a broad scope. Everybody does things differently. So that's what we're really talking about with these soft skills. If we go and define it, it's really talking about how you effectively interact with other people. What do you guys think are some soft skills that come to mind? Maybe in your interactions with other people, with students, with other faculty members, if you came from industry, go ahead and pop them in the chat so we can see what we're thinking when we think about soft skills. Humor, that is a great one. Being able to break that ice and put other people at ease. Especially when I teach sales, that is something that we are coaching students on being able to do. How are you connecting with people as a person or like a human, as we just heard? Empathy, focusing on the relationships and the underlying interactions between relationships. Influence, conflict management is a huge one. We did that in my sales management class this semester, and man, let me tell you, That was a lively conversation just to get students to understand different aspects and sides of conflict. Everybody does not have the same experience. In a conflict between two people, there are three sides to what happened, right? Trust is a really big one. Listening and over talking. You have two ears and one mouth for a reason, right? Teamwork. All of these are great soft skills. Some top soft skills from articles that I found online and things that I hear when I talk to employers, we're talking about that communication, right? Written communication is huge. I know I was literally just talking to somebody the other day to say, I honestly have no idea what these students are talking about half the time. They use so many abbreviations. It's almost like I have to have one tab open just to figure out what they're talking about with the for real, and the cap and the this and the that. So much of communication comes down to understanding the message that you're trying to portray and what you're trying to receive, right? Written communication, non-verbal communication, verbal communication, all things that we can help students perfect. That time management piece is huge. Trying to get students to understand you have a finite amount of hours in a given day. If you're practicing 9 hours a day, you're in class 4 hours a day, you're socializing 6 hours a day, you've run out of time. How are we actually managing your time? How are you reminding yourself that you have these assignments? I know I talk to students all the time and say, like, okay, you are supposed to be doing things outside of class. What kind of regimen do you have? What kind of system do you have? And that all goes back to time management. Being able to adapt to the situation on the fly. Yes, you prepared one thing, hopefully, ideally, right? But the customer says something different. You have to pivot. You're seeing your dashboard and your analytics for Google Analytics, and you're seeing the bounce rate increase. What's happening on your landing page that you need to adjust? Are we doing A/B testing in emails? Those things of being able to actually adapt, take those hard skills to the next level, utilizing soft skills. Critical thinking, pushing them to say, hey, think about this from a different perspective. That's one thing that I do in my entrepreneurship courseware that helps them look at things from different perspectives, not only from you as a consumer view, not only from you as a marketer. Let's look at it from the IT perspective. Are we promising this person that we can implement this system in a time that's not going to actually work for the greater good of the business? Just thinking about things holistically, that end-to-end thought process. Empathy is one that we saw in the chat as well. That emotional intelligence is so important. Not only being able to be self-aware and regulate yourself, but also be aware of what's happening from the person that you're talking to. If you are engaging with somebody on social media as a marketing manager, for example, and they're talking to you in all caps, should you treat them a little differently? Should you understand that they're probably upset? And being able to adjust accordingly. Accepting feedback is a huge one. I tell students all the time, it's not bad that you received a B. I'm giving you feedback for how you can get better. Don't just look at the number and then say, all right, whatever, this is how much I got. Look at the feedback because you want to get better. When you get into the working world, you're having performance reviews and they're giving you that feedback of what they want to see from you in the future. It's not a time to shut down. It's not a time to throw up your hands. It's a time to say, okay, I know this is how I need to adjust going forward. And this is something that students don't know. We're in a society where you feel the need to be perfect all the time. Just look at social media, right? We put our best and our brightest out front so that people see that. And then we hide the kind of imperfections and we don't want things to be done until it's perfect. Put it out there. You have to get feedback. If you're not getting feedback, then your perspective is limited. So that's just one of them. Teamwork, right? Nobody works in a silo. I tell my students that all the time. I don't care if you're in marketing, finance, accounting, IT, HR, you are literally always going to work in a team. Even if you're an entrepreneur, your customers are part of your team. They're part of your stakeholders. You hire people, that's still a team. There are layers to the team, but you still have to work in a team. How are we helping students? I know students hate group work. I have something that's going to address that here shortly, but these are all soft skills that we are in charge as faculty, as people in academia, to help students understand these and how they connect to their hard skills that we're teaching them. So how are we teaching soft skills? This is something that a lot of academics are struggling with. I'm so focused in this 16 weeks that I can't focus on all of these ancillary things. I'm trying to get them to understand these aspects, right? These elements of how to apply the hard skills part of it. How am I supposed to tack on the soft skills as well? I have some opinions for you. So 3 areas that I use to help integrate those classroom lessons of hard skills with those soft skills that I want to encourage. One is role play activities. Now, this is not just for sales. I role play in negotiations classes. I role play in entrepreneurship classes, in general business classes, first year experience classes. All classes can benefit from a role play because just like the SimTernships, this gives the students an opportunity to participate. We're not just lecturing, we're not pointing to slides, we're not giving them definitions that in all honesty, they can Google on their own. We're trying to connect the dots for them because that's where the value comes in for education. How do you respond in this specific scenario? This is the background, this is the information, and then you have that conversation. You have them act it out, or you express that and go through it. We'll talk about that more here shortly. Improv exercises are another way that I help students hone soft skills. Go ahead and pop it in the chat. What do you guys think students are getting from improv exercises? Improvisation, thinking on the spot, what are they understanding? What are we helping them do by utilizing improv exercises? Confidence is huge. I have some students that won't talk out loud in class. Being able to talk in front of others, responding based on listening. You guys are spot on. That critical thinking, being uncertain. If you don't know what you're doing until the moment that you're doing it, that's a real world situation because there is no opportunity where you can anticipate everything that a customer is going to say to you, everything that your supervisor is going to say to you. They could very well drop by your desk and ask you for some report. How are you going to handle that? How are you going to build that banter? How are you going to build that rapport? Students struggle with rapport a lot. After the weather and maybe the most recent sports situation, how do you actually build that rapport? So improv exercises helps with that. We'll talk a little bit more about that here shortly. And then what I like to call the group dynamics assessments and peer performance reviews. Now, as a student, I did some peer performance, and let's be honest, sometimes we're biased, right? We're trying to give other students the good grade. We're just kind of checking boxes. So we'll talk a little bit more about that here shortly as well. So role play activities. Again, this is not just for sales or sales students. I like to do it based on cases. So something like the cases that are prepared that you see and that you have, that teaching note. Well, I like to take that a step further. We're not only going to assess what happened in the case and answer the questions that are going along with it, potentially. I have students work in groups to say, okay, come up with solutions, pick one of the problems that was presented, come up with solutions, right? And then it's like a little blitz round. After they come up with solutions, I talk through it with them, and then I say, okay, now play devil's advocate. Why will your solution not work? And make sure you do it thoroughly, because when we open it up to the entire class, your peers' main job will be to poke holes in your solution. Now they're challenged at a different level to say, okay, I'm not going to just say this is a solution that'll work just to check a box. Now I'm really trying to think about all the different perspectives and how to make this, as I call, bulletproof, where nobody can poke holes in this situation. Another option that I've done for role play-esque activities is I put up a scenario on the board. Usually I do it with the ethical dilemma or a situation of mixed priorities. That's a situation that I faced when I was in industry a lot. You have a lot on your plate that your supervisor has given you, but they haven't prioritized it for you. How do you go about prioritizing the amount of work that you have, right? So I will put up a scenario on the board. Let's say one that I did this semester. You have somebody that you are interviewing as a manager. This person has a spotty work history. They've only worked about 2 years for the last 5 years at different locations. They have a lot of different companies on their resume. Do we hire this person that seems like a great fit? Your team has mixed reviews. Do we hire them? What is it that we can do during the interview process to address some of this? What types of questions could we ask? What type of information can we find? Do we do additional research on them? What does that research look like? And then you get them thinking not only as a manager in this situation, you get them thinking about equitable hiring practices. You get them thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Well, we have this situation where this person turned down the job because you had a completely homogeneous team. The team was all Caucasian men. And this person decided they didn't want to work on that team. How do we address something like that? That's a real thing that happens out in industry. A student gave that as an example during a DEI workshop. So then we have that open discussion of, well, how do you combat something like that? Are there benefits that we could offer to make that situation a little bit more inviting to the person? We had a discussion about belonging and inclusivity. Does everybody have to look the same to make somebody feel inclusive? Well, of course not. But students haven't had those life experiences all the time, so they don't know that type of thing. Looking at it from a different perspective really helps to broaden their horizon and their perspective of different situations, whether it's one certain skill set or a geographic region or something that's a little bit more sensitive like a DEIB type of situation. Having them work through these issues in this safe environment and throw things against the wall. I have students so often, especially when it comes to performance reviews. If it's a case where like the employee has done something and they're like, well, we should adjust how we evaluate based on who it is. Now, does that ring like any alarm bells for you? That's some red flags. So as the professor in this instance, I say, well, I understand where you're coming from, but let's look at it from this perspective. If you're adjusting how you evaluate people based on who they are, there's some opportunity for some bias here, isn't it? And you're like, oh no, I didn't think about that. I say, yeah, what happens if you get somebody in a position of power that has something against someone else for whatever reason? That's a power dynamic that we aren't comfortable with, right? Because they can take that out on that person. So then they start to understand. I used one example. I said, okay, well, what happens if your employee has an affair with their supervisor? And then we can take that out on them. Like retaliation is real and they don't think about things like that because they're 19, 20, 21 years old. So they don't always think about things in a working world. We talk about stuff like, there was one case where the protagonist of the case continued to drink on the job, right? And they're like, oh my God, that's horrible. Like that never happens. I'm like, well, you have these conferences, you have these, all these social events. Like, what do you do in those situations? And that helps students. And a lot of them gave me feedback and reviews in their evaluation of the class. Like, that was really helpful. No, it was not a hard skill. I was not teaching them how to run pivot tables, but when they go to that conference and they are there at that meal where they present that report, there are a lot of underlying things and little small details happening that they might not be prepared for. So I found that role play-esque activities really help, especially in facilitating that class discussion. Super simple to put together, not a whole lot of prep. Think about a situation and then just have students work through it and challenge them, pushing them outside of their comfort zone to look at it from different perspectives. Secondly, the improv exercises. So these little mini games break up the lecture time and give students an opportunity to talk to each other. I've gotten feedback from students that is like, I never knew that this person and I had all of this alike. I never knew that we were we were from the same small town, just like 2 years apart. Because a lot of times, we go and, they're in class and we're like, no, pay attention, listen, be quiet. But this gives them an opportunity to talk, but it's not as high stakes as a all class presentation or the end of the semester presentation when everybody is super swamped and very stressed. So have a few games, active listening, quick responsive thinking. It breaks up the monotony of those lectures that we have to do, but it also allows them a little bit of leeway. So I've done networking simulations. So it's like a blitz round. I tell them you have 2 minutes and then I give them some type of objective. Find out what they learned from their last internship without just asking, hey, what did you learn from your last internship? Help them figure out something unique about yourself. Help them plan their summer activities. So they're given this prompt and then they have 2 minutes to find this. So that's purposeful information and it simulates a little bit for a networking situation because students struggle, at least in my experience, they struggle with rapport building. Well, what do I talk to this person about? And then we have elevator pitches that you can hone in on and you give them some type of prompt. Hey, you're meeting this person in the elevator, respond. And that helps them not prepare beforehand, think on the spot, get their reflex, that exercise that muscle of responding on the fly and figuring things out. Another game I like to play is telling a story. So I'll start a story and say like, one day I was walking, and then I'll have the next person finish. And we'll do it as a class. So we'll recap and it goes all different directions, but then it has people active listening. It has them responding in real time and adding stuff so it makes sense, right? So exercising that difference between active listening versus passive listening. Yes, we can have a lecture slide about active listening versus passive listening, but in most instances, most of them will be passive listening. So I found that improv helps a lot with that. Guess what is a game that I created where you describe a theory or a concept that you have done in class. So if we are like the 4 P's of marketing, for example, or the features, advantages, and benefits, I'll have students describe those, and then the other student has to guess what they're describing. So it challenges them to say, okay, let me make sure I really understand the 4 P's. Let me make sure I really understand FABs. And now I'm trying to explain it and utilizing that other person to kind of volley off of them and feed off of them to go through those examples. I found that that's a really helpful exercise as well. Now, the group dynamics assessment. This is one that I really enjoy because we know everybody needs group work, but everybody hates group work. And that is because somebody is not going to pull their weight. So I tell students, this is a group assignment, but everybody has to turn something in. If you do not turn something in, I'm making the assumption that you did not participate with your group. Therefore, you get a 0, regardless of what the rest of the group does. Now, when that comes to execution, That means they need to submit a group dynamics assessment. That will be 5 questions that I will ask about what happened within the group. I appoint a leader, so this gives them that leadership experience. I say, hey, leader, you have the power to delegate tasks. You have the power to call meetings and coordinate. So now they're looking at time management. Now they're looking at communication. Now they're looking at leadership. Now they're looking at delegation of tasks, and their ask is elevated, right? I'm not doing anything. All I do is appoint the leader, and then the rest goes from there. If you have a problem, you come to me. Think of me as your senior level manager. You are a middle manager. Your teammates are your workers, essentially. You guys are working together on something. If you need to escalate, that's when you bring it to me. Other than that, you are in charge of your group of 5 to 8 people to execute on this task. At the end, that one person that's the leader, they submit the final project. So they're in charge of making sure that it meets all the requirements that are a part of the assignment. They are in charge of formulating and making sure that group members help. And then all of the other group members submit a group dynamics assessment where they answer 5 questions. What was the leadership style of your leader? Do you think it was effective? Why or why not was it effective? How was it decided who would do what in the assignment? Then I go through what did you learn from the assignment? What would you do differently? And then I ask them who went above and beyond and deserves extra credit. And those 5 questions are not always for every group assignment, because what I never want to happen is that a student just answers the questions the same ways. So I change up the questions if it's a class with multiple group assignments. From there, I direct students that you will be incentivized with extra credit. You can award extra credit. The more honest your group dynamics assessment is, the better you can score. So I look at the actual assignment, and then there's a baseline. So for example, if the assignment is worth 25 points, I look at the leader's submission, grade that assignment, and then that's the baseline for everybody else. If you did not submit anything, you automatically get a 0. If you submitted something, but it's one-word responses, you're not answering the question, so you say, oh, well, they used the laissez-faire leadership style, it was fine. That's not a full credit thing. Then from that baseline grade, your grade starts to go down. So everybody on the team is not getting the same grade. And that addresses the reason why most students hate group work, because everybody gets the same grade for minimal to no work potentially, and one person has the grunt of the work. So that's how I do that. And then at the end of the semester, I surprise them and have them do a peer performance review. And they're like, oh my God, I don't know, I'm not a manager. Then I have them evaluate on a scale of 1 to 5 with the markers of it, so they know, okay, well, that person wasn't really there. I have them rating each other on things like communication, attendance for meetings, participation. Were they helpful? Were they creative? Did they provide feedback? Did they go along with the assignment? Were they an active participant? And then what type of feedback would you give to them to increase their performance in the future? Because what we want to do is always provide feedback. If we look at Bloom's taxonomy of learning, the learning is most optimized when you are teaching others. By being able to look at somebody critically and say, okay, you did great, but this is what you need to do to improve. We constantly push up the envelope of how our students are performing, and we are helping them hone that skill of looking at something critically and helping them improve as well. A bonus tip, coaching them through the process. One thing that I realized, students are partially in college to learn these things. They have not, in some instances, they've not had a job. So I asked them, like, okay, well, what happens if you have a no call, no show at your job? Have you worked? They say, yes. Okay, well, what happens? Oh, well, you get fired. Why do you think this situation is different? Oh, well, I guess it's not. Exactly. How would you feel if you were here at 9 a.m. for class that starts at 9:30 got here, and I was never here? Oh, well, I'd be mad. This was a waste of time. I did this, I sacrificed that, etc., etc. I said, exactly. So this is how you address tardiness. This is how you address no calls, no shows. For example, have students come up to me and like, oh man, I missed the deadline. I'm so sorry. Will you still take my assignment? Well, we have to have a discussion first, right? So I give them a grace period. So I know things happen in real life. So once you're in the working world, things happen, but there are also consequences. After that grace period is over, I asked them, okay, I understand you missed the assignment. You did it. Great job. That furthers your learning. What is the process that you use to manage your time? How are you managing your assignments? How were you able to forget it? Do you check in your learning management system every day? Do you use a calendar? Do you have a to-do list? How was it that you managed to forget an assignment, right? So I'm walking them through that process to say, hey, this is the proper way to address that. I understand maybe you have, extenuating circumstance. Let's work through that. Let's talk through this process. And then I make that determining decision if I want to, I help them with how this looks in the future. Like, okay, well, you're past the deadline for this assignment. Next time, this is what you should do to reinforce those rules and regulations that are in the syllabus, but also help them. And a student will say, well, I do this, I do that, I do this. And I said, okay, how's that working? Well, not great. I've missed the last 3 assignments, right? Accurate assessment. How are we going to correct it? We're in week 5. You have 11 weeks left. How are we going to correct it? Oh, I don't know. I hadn't thought about it. All right, let's talk about it. Let's work through this, right? So that helps as well. And that helps them not only be able to assert themselves with confidence, because a lot of times if you don't ask, nothing will happen, but it also forces them to think through that process and adjust accordingly, rather than waiting until it's too late. I wanted to also share with you guys my entrepreneurship courseware that I co-wrote with Stu. It helps students practice these soft skills by creating a holistic end-to-end business perspective. A lot of times we'll teach in silos of, all right, these are your accounting things. You might have a principles of marketing class, but you might not think about them connecting together. And I have a bonus for you guys today. The SMART Goals assignment from the entrepreneurship courseware is here. That is so helpful with students. They get some students are like, oh, we know this, like you make goals. Yeah. And some students are like, I don't know, I guess it's a goal. Helping them create SMART goals is a soft skill that we have to do. They have to be able to plan their future and know where they're going, or else they're just floating. The entrepreneurship courseware also has minimal prep lift that you have to do. There are lesson plans for multiple modalities and lengths of the semester, lots of activities and things that you can do. There is a flipped classroom, so you direct students to read, and then all activities that are already prepped and done and have slides for are there in the courseware. And thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity. This has been a great digital summit so far. I'd love to open it up for questions now.
Jen, thank you so much. While we're giving people a chance to enter in their questions, I just want to point out, go ahead and click on the link on your screen, and we'll give you free instructor access to Jen's entrepreneurship courseware. So just take a quick moment, click on that, and you'll have access to all the assignments, the lesson plans, the syllabus. You can check it all out. We're really excited about her courseware. Also, while we're waiting for a couple of questions to come in, Jen, I want to talk to you a little bit about ProfCon. Stu mentioned that this morning, Stuart did, and you have presented at ProfCon, and you're actually presenting this year at ProfCon. Talk to us a little bit about why you think professors should make the trip and come to ProfCon.
Yeah, so I am so excited. This will be my first in-person ProfCon, and I am so excited to come out and just be in that environment with other people. These digital sessions and summits and conferences are fantastic. I love the ability to be able to attend a digital thing and not have to go through the whole travel request and expense reports. However, this experience is going to be phenomenal because we not only get the information from the speakers, we get to engage and interact with each other. And 𝐒𝐭𝐮 is great about that, whether it's digital or in person. But I love the addition of the networking day and just being able to be around other educators and get information for how they're doing things in class that I can add and make my class a richer experience for the students.
That's awesome. Thanks, Jen. If you're interested, go ahead and click on the link and you can learn more about ProfCon. If you have any questions, please reach out. Anyone in the chats.
Oh, looks like he's reconnecting. Let's see if we have some questions.
Sorry about that. I think I had a little glitch there. Okay, I want to hop into some questions. All right, Jen, the chats were going crazy during your presentation. Lots of comments on soft skills. This first one says, I appreciate your focus on soft skills. This is from Benton. What activities within the courseware allow practice of soft skills?
Yep, so in the entrepreneurship courseware, students are actually thinking through and completing worksheets the whole time as to what they would do from an entrepreneurship perspective. So they are making decisions and they are providing feedback to a protagonist that follows them throughout the story. So they see Jasmine Abrams, a budding entrepreneur that's working 9 to 5, that is kind of pulled to entrepreneurship, and she wants to explore that. And she's trying to figure out, well, I know I want to be an entrepreneur, but I don't know what I want to sell. And students are actually challenged to provide her that feedback, requiring them to look at the situation and kind of case that they are given in every chapter to help her address her concerns.
That's awesome. That's such a fun part of your courseware. Barbara asked, this is an interesting question. How do you deal with students trying to use charm in their improv rather than trying to think about the situation?
That happens a lot. And I tell students, customers can see through, BS, right? They can see through that. Utilizing your charisma is always appropriate if you're being appropriate, right? So we want to make sure that we're acting in with integrity and that we are keeping up the ethics of ourselves and our moral compass, but as well as the company. And you still have to know your stuff and have prepared well. That happens a lot in my negotiations class where they're like, oh, I can just wing it. And I tell them and present them with information on why that is not always the best option. If you're not prepared, if you don't know your information, people will be able to see through that winging it. And because we are in an information age, they already know all the information that's out there. They're seeing you and they're interacting with you for follow-up questions. You have to have a depth of knowledge to really be able to follow up with some good questions and be able to answer them. So that exchange is really when we have to really focus. And then you utilize your charisma to deliver the information rather than skate through answering that situation.
Great. Thank you, Jen. This question is a good one. What is the hardest soft skill to teach, in your opinion?
Honestly, probably adaptability, because you can other skills like the teamwork, that's something that you constantly work on. Communication is something that is never done. I tell students soft skills are just like resumes. You're never done. I know they don't want to hear that they're never done with their resume, but everybody who sees your resume is going to have a different opinion. Same thing with soft skills. You hone it, you work on it, but the adaptability is really what gets students. And I always tell them, the better prepared you are and the more research you've done, the better you can shift and pivot based on what comes at you.
Okay, that's a great tip for being more adaptable, being prepared. So I like that. How do you make the students feel the importance and understand the importance of soft skills?
Well, it's a little bit unorthodox, but sometimes I start the semester talking about the difference between hard skills hiring and soft skills hiring. So we look at job description and I say, okay, well, what are the things that they're asking for that are intangible? What are the things that they're asking for that are those hard skills, right? You're here. So I think education is wonderful. So you made a good decision to be here. You're going to get the credential, assuming that you do what you're supposed to do. How do you tell the difference between you and you? And I just pit them against each other at that moment. That makes them a little competitive. They're like, oh, well, I have a higher GPA, or I've done all these internships. And I say, okay, all things equal, how will I pick between you? And they say, well, I don't know. That's where soft skills come in at. If you can't articulate what you've done, how do I know as your hiring manager that I want to hire you, right? That goes back to communication. If you are not on time, punctuality is it's a tiny thing, but you have to be punctual so that I know that I can count on you. I'm hiring you to do a job. That means I'm going to trust you to do your job. Autonomy is part of that. If I can't see that in how you act or how you interview, will I hire you? And they're like, well, no, of course not. There you go. Back to those soft skills.
I like it. That's great. What is one or two things that students can do outside of the classroom to work on building their soft skills?
I say emotional intelligence is a big one, right? So just being emotionally aware. I explain it to students like, have any of you ever felt some kind of way, right? Using their verbiage. You feel some type of way? That's emotional intelligence. Trying to figure out why you feel some type of way. How do we perfect that? How do we get better at that? Really critical thinking, understanding, recapping things, talking to other people that you trust, talking to people with different perspectives so that you can see multiple sides of a situation. That's how you get better.
Great. All right, I have one last question here.
Okay.
How do you go about working with students who are at different grade levels? Seniors will have more experience and more deadlines versus a freshman or a sophomore.
Yep, that is true. So I will adjust based on, I teach a lot of classes that have a wide variety of majors and a wide variety of education levels. So usually if a student needs, I will try to mix the group. So I try to make sure that there is representation from everybody as possible in a group. So I won't have like an all male group, or I won't have an all female group, just to make sure that they're getting exposure to a different baseline perspective from a gender perspective. For the different levels, I will change how it's required. So if I'm doing a class that has all freshmen, I would do the time management presentation versus a class with all seniors. One of my groups would be doing the time management presentation. And then I would follow up with that just in case they didn't hit all the points that I want them to hit. So putting a little bit more responsibility on them as they are higher in their matriculation is one way that I address it. Starter articles is another way. So if I'm requiring students to present on something like giving good presentations, I'll give them starter articles versus saying, hey, this is what you're required to do. These are your outlines. This is the rubric. Now you go forth and do it. I'll get them started with their research.
Great. Well, Jen, as always, this has been phenomenal. I want to read just one comment that just came through from Chanel. Dr. Jen, you are the professor that I needed when I was in school. I know that your students just love you.
Thank
I
you.
feel the same way.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I can just tell you have a lot of heart in this. We're so lucky to be able to work with you. So thank you so much. I'll let you hop off and
thank you. Have a good one, everyone.